I told you so. Don't you get special delight when you've earned the right to say those words? Jordan and I have this ongoing deal about whether or not, like, the Cubs will ever make it to the World Championship. And he tells me every year they will, and I tell him, of course, they won't. Well, so far, I haven't said it, but this year, maybe it'll be your turn to say, I told you so. And he'll get great satisfaction in that. Now, of course, when it goes the other way, he doesn't show up for like a month anywhere around me so that I can say it to him, hoping that I will have forgotten. Or like when you tell a child or a spouse. Now, if you do that, you're going to make a mess. I can do it. I can do it. And as soon as the crash happens, you don't even have to say it. The child or the spouse says, don't say it, I know. Well, do you think Jesus, took pleasure in setting people up so he could say, I told you so? I mean, Jesus was never wrong, and he kept telling people stuff, and people wouldn't listen. So don't you think at some point Jesus would like to have said, I told you so? And then Jesus would maybe instead see us mess up, and we would say, you don't even have to tell me, Jesus, and he would just smile. So is that how you think Jesus is? You know, these stories that we've been looking at, that Jesus has been telling around the dinner table with sinners and tax collectors and Pharisees and his disciples. This is the last one of those in that series we'll be looking at. And a lot of people think about, especially this story, as a warning sign. Now, you know about warning signs, right? I mean, stop signs, yield signs, swim at your own risk signs. We ignore them at our own peril. But let's face it, sometimes by mistake, sometimes on purpose, we mess up and we ignore the sign and we drive through the stop sign and bad things happen. And no one needs to tell you, I told you to stop. We know it, but it's too late. Well, sometimes we do get it. I like the story that a British evangelist, Rico Tice, tells. He says that he was in Australia visiting a friend, and this friend took him to the Botany Bay, and he had decided he wanted to go for a swim. So he was taking off his shirt, and he was going to jump in, and his friend said to him, what are you doing? Well, I'm going for a swim. And he said, well, don't you see those signs? Danger, sharks. And Tice says that with all the confidence of an Englishman abroad, he says, don't be ridiculous, I'll be fine. And his friend said, listen, mate, 200 Australians have died in shark attacks. You've got to decide whether those shark signs are there to save you or to ruin your fun. You're of age, you decide. So he decided not to go for a swim. So is that how you think this story is? Jesus is saying, look out, be careful. Is Jesus setting up an I told you so moment in this story? That could be the point of it. I'm sure as this lectionary passage is preached around the world today, there will be many who will be preaching this as a be careful or you're going to hell story. I don't think that is what this story is about. Now, I do believe in hell. All of you apparently do too. All of you anyway who stood with me and said he descended into hell. Well, if you believe Jesus descended into hell, you must believe there is a hell where Jesus went. Now, what that place is and what it's like and who goes there and what happens there and all of that, that's a topic for another sermon. But I believe there is a hell. But I think some people believe in hell like they believe in sharks. I guess there are sharks, but I don't know if they'll be around when I'm swimming. But anyway, I digress. I don't want to talk about that today. But I think it is real. I think that's something we should talk about someday. But I don't think that's what Jesus was talking about here, despite the whole story that you just heard. I think he was talking about the fact that it's important to believe what you see with your own eyes. And having believed, then to do something about it. So let me tell you why I think that this story is not the shark beware sign, but is rather about something else. It's a story about a rich man who dressed in fancy robes, surrounding himself with all the trappings of wealth, mansions, daily feasts, elaborate parties with the rich and famous, who envied invitations to his home. There also was a poor man, sick man, slept at the gates of the mansion. Whenever the rich man came home, he would see this poor man sitting at his gate, and there would be the stray dogs licking at the festering wounds of this poor man, who would cry out as the Rolls Royce rolled by, "Please, a piece of bread." Well, the rich man doesn't call the police, doesn't ask the city council to pass a law saying, "Get rid of these people laying in the streets. What's this all about anyway?" No, he just ignores them. He rolls right by in his Rolls Royce, doesn't even see him. Or doesn't he? You see, maybe he used to see him, but now he is so used to seeing him that he's just become a part of the scenery. The poor man dies. The rich man dies. The poor man is now at the great banquet table in heaven, seated next to Abraham, resting with Abraham. The rich man is dying of thirst in hell, and he cries out to Abraham because he knows Abraham. He's apparently a religious man, knows Abraham. And he says, "Can you please send down Lazarus," as if Lazarus is a servant, "with a bottle of Perrier? I'm dying of thirst." You see, did you hear what happens? He knows his name. He stopped seeing him, but he knew his name. He must have believed that this man was a man, a Lazarus, who had a name, but he stopped believing, or never believed, that he needed to see him. He just ignored him. The mistake of the rich man is not that he did something wrong, it's just that he did nothing. Lazarus, he thought, was not his problem. Lazarus, he didn't even realize, was his opportunity to cross the great chasm. You see, we're all on this journey. We end up on one side of the great chasm or the other. But then one day the journey is over for all of us. And so Jesus is saying, both in this parable and also the parable we had last week about the unjust steward, the unjust manager. The point of that story is not, that story was not about that it's okay to give away your boss's money, any more than this story, I think, is about hell. The point of both of the stories is this: act while you can. Act while you are on this earth and make plans for your future. That's what Jesus is trying to teach in these stories. The time to act is now. Too often we think about life like the little boy in Sunday school who, when the teacher asks the children if they would rather be Lazarus or the rich man, the one little boy says, "I'd like to be the rich man while I'm alive and Lazarus when I'm dead." But of course it doesn't work that way. That's what Jesus is saying. So when the rich man hears he's at the journey's end, he says, well, then send Lazarus back, raise him from the dead, and send him to my family so they will change their ways. And then they can cross over the chasm before they die. Well, this is a well-known device, a literary device. Yeah, we know it, of course, well from Dickens, who borrowed this whole idea. And that's Scrooge, who sees the ghost of Marley. And that brings the happy ending, right? Send the ghost or send the raised man back, and then Scrooge will lead a new life. That's a well-known literary device going back, to the beginning of literary devices. And so Jesus, though, puts a special twist on it. Jesus says, no, it's not going to do any good to send the ghost of Marley to Scrooge. So I want to tell you a little true story. Last week, a couple of little girls were playing in the church after worship, and they heard a noise. I think it probably was Rich cleaning up or something. But anyway, they run down to me in the Faith Center, and they say, Pastor Bill, there's somebody in the sanctuary. And I said, no, it's probably Rich, closing up, so don't worry about it. So one little girl runs back into the sanctuary to play whatever they were doing. And the second little girl hangs back and calls me down, and she whispers in my ear, so, there aren't any ghosts in church? No, honey. There are no ghosts in church. And off she goes. There are no ghosts in church. But we think, like the rich man, that it would be great if we could see someone, not a ghost, but a real person who was dead and now is walking the earth, so we could know it's all true. But Jesus is saying that wouldn't make any difference. You see, religion is about faith, not certitude, not being certain. Our quest for certitude of knowing this has to be real is just an excuse for doing nothing. Well, because I can't see it's real, because I don't see what's happening in my life, I'm not going to have faith. I just won't believe any of it. I'm not going to be a part of a church then. And Jesus says that's the problem. It's not the problem of not seeing, it's the problem of not believing. It's the problem of not having faith. And so when we say, if I could see someone raised from the dead, then I would believe, no, you wouldn't. Because we know the story of the people who have seen and believed. We know the story of the empty tomb. Jesus, in John 11, Jesus raises Lazarus from the tomb. Not this Lazarus, a real live Lazarus, his best friend. And what happens when the people see Lazarus, who is dead, back to life? What do? They say, yay, I believe in Jesus? No. They say, let's assassinate Lazarus and take out Jesus too. That's what happens when people see live people come back from the dead. And Jesus knows this is our human nature. So Jesus says, look, if you can't believe the Easter story, if you can't believe what the prophets and the people in the Old Testament writers, if you can't believe what the New Testament writers have told you, if you can't believe in the empty cross, if you can't believe in the empty tomb, you're not going to believe it even if I send back somebody from the dead. So what are we going to do about this, Jesus, right? Jesus says, look, there's the empty tomb. You hear about it every year on Easter. We fill this place. Where do all the people go, right? Where do all the people go? If they believe the story, where do they go? They don't believe it. That's the problem. So Jesus says, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to change the world? For me, for my kingdom, for my people. How are we going to get people to believe this? And so Jesus says, look at this man. Do you see him? When Jill and I were in Paris on our vacation, we stayed in this little boutique-type hotel, really nice place. We walked out of this nice restaurant, walked out around the corner to go a different direction, and we saw this very image. This isn't what we saw, but it's just like this. And I just walked right on by. We saw him, all right, but what do we do about it? You see, that is the Lazarus that we have today. Jesus says, I'm showing you Lazarus while you're alive because Jesus is not trying to bribe us into heaven. Jesus isn't saying, look, if you don't help these poor people, then you're going to hell. What kind of story would that be? What kind of religion would that? There are religions like that, but that's not Christianity. Christianity is not about scaring people out of hell and into heaven. That doesn't work any more than it would to bring a live person up here. You would all say, well, there's got to be some other explanation. It can't be really that he's raised from the dead, because we don't really believe it. We want to believe it. You believe it. You're here, right? You're here because you believe that's real, that Jesus really did rise, that your loved ones really will rise, that you really will rise. But the world doesn't, so we got to change the world. How are we going to change the world? Okay, here's what Jesus says. You have to see Lazarus. If you are my disciples, you will see these people and you will believe that that's me. That's Jesus. When you see Lazarus, your Lazarus, you see me. When you show love to your Lazarus, you show love to me. Not to get saved from hell, but if you are grateful, here's the Reformed interpretation, I think, of this story. If you are grateful for the truth that I have saved you into heaven, if you're grateful for the fact that Jesus rose from the dead to save you from your sin, died on the cross to save you from your sin, rose from the dead so you can follow him, then when you see these poor, hungry people and homeless people on the face of the earth, you can say thank you to me by serving them, by seeing them, not ignoring them, not getting compassion fatigue, not turning off the news because it's too bitter or too bad, not saying I can't do anything to care for those people, but instead to give them hope. To give them hope. That's what Jesus says we should do while we're alive. This is our chance on this earth to be on the other side of the chasm and to say, thank you, Jesus. So, we handed out that money. And here's the thing. I'm going to give each of us a chance today to not be the rich man. And I'm going to give these children that same chance. Have a seat right up here, kids, okay? What we want to teach from the smallest child to the oldest adult is this. We can see Lazarus. These children, $159 feeds a child for a year. You all hold in your hands $159. But here's what I want to do. We don't want our church to be the rich man, right? Where we've stopped looking and say, well, we're taking care of ourselves. We have lots of parties. We're going to have a big party next week. Great, let's have a big... I love that we celebrate. I love we have hospitality for each other. But that's not the end of the work of the church. The real purpose of the church is to see Lazarus and to believe he is Jesus and to do something about it. So let's start today. I know this is uncomfortable. You've been holding that dollar, worrying about what is he going to say I have to do with this dollar. Okay, here it is. You don't have to do anything with the dollar. I'm not telling you if you take that dollar and put it in your pocket, you're going to hell, because it has nothing to do with whether you're going to heaven or hell. If you say Jesus Christ is Lord and you mean it with your heart, you're going to be with Jesus in heaven. But shouldn't you say thank you? That's what I'm talking about, right? So we're going to form some flash teams. What I want to do, we have these communication cards in there. So if you don't have money with you today, that's fine. You can give $1. You can take something out of your wallet. You don't have to. If you're not prepared to do something today, write your name on a communication card and say, I'll add $2 next Sunday. We're going to have some team leaders. We're going to ask you, as soon as the praise team is done with its last song, we're going to have one flash team that comes up here. Who are my leaders for up here? Okay, would you come and be over here? Okay, then we're going to have one flash team form back in the chapel, in the Windveen Chapel. Would you stand? Okay, there's Connie. She's going to meet you in the chapel. We're going to have 2 teams. So you want to get some coffee and think about it on your way out? We're going to have 2 teams in the Faith Center. So we have 2 leaders. Who's going to be? Chris, you're going to be by, there's Chris. She's going to be in the Faith Center by the mailboxes, right? Tim, you're going to be by the computer in the Faith Center. They'll be there after the song. All right. Now look, if you want to go home, if you're uncomfortable with this, that's fine. You can go home. No problem. I'm not angry about it, not upset. God's not angry. God's not upset. But this is your chance to not be the rich man. This is your chance to find, what? Let's say 25 people come up here. I have 2 things I want you to do. This will take 5 minutes. Maybe 3. Introduce yourself to somebody in this church. That's why I want to do it random. I want you to meet somebody that you know you're in a community of faith together. So just randomly go to these 4 stations and give your dollar to the team leader. If that's all you do, great. We're going to raise $159. Well, unless you take your money home. I'll cover the difference. But we're going to feed one child for 1 year as a community. But maybe it'll be more. Maybe you have something. Why don't you 4 leaders get an offering plate? All right, we'll do that. We'll get you one during the song. Okay, and if you don't want to put money in, that's fine. If you want to later put an offering plate, if you want to, but write your name on a communication card and say, I'll think about this and get back to you next week. And your team leader will explain how to get a hold of you. You can do it all anonymously if you want. Just put feed one offering, put that on there. But my main goal is this, that we figure out how to work as a church together. I could have just taken that $159, send it to rca.org, feed one, and we would have done the same thing, but we wouldn't have done the same thing because that's just me doing it. What difference does it make if I do it? It's that you do it. So let's do it.